Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Our current session is about bilinguality versus bilingualism. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to differentiate between the two terms and you would be able to understand how each of these terms operates in sociolinguistics. Well, my dear students, at the outset, to understand the concepts and their interrelationship, it is important to understand first what does each of these terms mean and what is the difference in the terms. Well, when we talk of bilinguality, actually we are talking of individual. And when we are talking of bilingualism, we are talking most of the times of the group or the community or the society. So, bilinguality versus bilingualism, generally speaking, generates the idea of individual versus a collected phenomena of using more than two languages. Well, Romain has differentiated between the two and says bilinguality is the psychological state of an individual. So, there are two important points for us to understand. A, according to Romain, it is about the individual. Secondly, it is about the psychological state, the mental state, the psychological perspective about language of an individual who has access to more than one linguistic codes as a means of social communication. So, according to this definition of Romain, bilinguality, A, deals with an individual. Secondly, it deals with the psychological perspectives or the state of, mind of an individual, which means what is the attitude of an individual, what is the behavior of an individual, how does an individual think about, this phenomenon of using more than one languages. This access is multidimensional as it varies along a number of psychological and sociological dimensions. This would vary in two ways. A, it would vary from person to person, individual to individual. So individuals A, B, C, and D, each one of them would have varying degree of not only the knowledge of, but also, the desire of using different, combinations of codes or, the codes that are available as more than one code in for the purposes of communication in social life. The second kind of, aspect that it deals with is that there are certain social and psychological factors that would again vary from individual to individual. The behavior and the attitude of the user A would be different from B, and B different from C, and C different from D respectively. How? Because and why? Because of certain factors: the psychological factors, the emotional attachment or detachment, the sociological factors, the kind of lifestyle, the social class, the surroundings, the needs of the environment, the motivation that is external and the motivation that is internal. All these factors would determine for, the nature of the bilinguality of a particular speaker. Well, there are certain other dimensions that are relevant. Relative competence, how one person's, competence is different from the other person's competence, and that person's competence is different from yet another person. Cognitive organization of all the knowledge of that language, about all the information that is related to that language. Age of acquisition would also make a difference. From one individual to the other, what is the age at which, that person has acquired or has learned the second language, third language, fourth, or any other languages that are a part of the bilingual repertoire of that person, and then, at what age that person is using them. Exogeneity and socio-cultural status also makes a difference. Individuals would make choices in terms of where they are socially placed and what is it that they perceive about themselves socially. Cultural identity is another important marker. What is it that an individual wants himself or herself to be viewed as in terms of cultural affiliations? If a person wants to be affiliated to a particular culture, that person would use that particular language and would switch over to or shift to another language when wants to be identified with some other group or with some other culture. When it comes to the measurement of bilinguality, there are certain issues that are related to that. We must need to consider the definition of bilinguality here, because this is more like a psychological state, so it would vary from person to person. There is another definition that says that this psychological measurement of bilinguality plays an important role when it comes to individuals' bilingual practices, whereas when it comes to bilingualism, logical state matters more, and this is more like how as a community choices are made between the codes or taking two or more than two codes at a time. So, there are reasons to believe that the bilingual is more than the sum of two monolinguals. It is more about the behavior that is displayed through the language choices.